Hello, everyone, and welcome back. This is our Pro Athlete interview series, and this is brought to you by the Family Office Club. And today we're here with Carolyn. And Carolyn, how are you doing today?
It's wonderful to be here. I've heard great things about the impact you're having on many levels with various demographics, so it's wonderful to be here.
Well, much appreciated. And I know I was talking to Carolyn when we were looking to schedule you for this podcast and for this interview. And I know that we haven't had a chance to have you come out to one of our live events, but we do a lot of these different things from the podcast to interviews to the live events, which are like our super summits, where we have one coming up in New York. We have one out in Florida. Or you might have seen this, like we have a social media following. I think it's like 15.5 million right now, whether it's
Yep.
on YouTube or LinkedIn or any of those. However you came to us, thank you. And I'm excited for you guys to get to know Carolyn here. And the whole point of this is when we have our different live events or do interviews, a lot of times we'll have investors up on stage, professional athletes like Carolyn. And the whole point of it is to try to get some insights and advice of what did they do themselves to get to where they are now. So for Carolyn, how did she get to become a 0.1 percenter in the athletic space or now in the business space? And sort of how did she do that? And then maybe we can get some insights whether if we're a professional athlete ourselves, I'm not right now, but if we are a professional athlete, like how can we actually get ourselves to that same level? And what are some of those tips and strategies and tricks that you were able to use that we could then use ourselves or just take them and tweak them so that they fit us. So that way they actually work. So thank you for taking the time.
Absolutely. Those are all great questions. What I like the most is you talk about the intersection of business and sport. And I do think a lot of athletes potentially can struggle with that transition. So they don't create the groundwork for what are their passions, what are their skill sets, what is their defined expertise. And my first advice is to merge your passion with your skill set with demand in the world. The world is ever changing. When you think about technology, when you think about even COVID and how that changed, how we do e-commerce, how we do brick and mortar business, how hybrid work has changed the way in which we communicate with one another from a business standpoint. So, going back to athletes, first identifying what is my true passion? What is my calling in this lifetime? And you don't need to know freshman year in college, for example. I
Yeah.
started out pre med, I always share my story. And the flaw that I found in our healthcare system, it was based on treatment, not prevention. My passion lies in preventative health, lifestyle modification, nutrition, fitness, promoting anti-alcohol, anti-drug messages amongst teenagers. So I knew in my heart I wanted to work in a space that would be profitable, but also feel good to my soul. And that means I'm helping people live better and longer. And when I was pre-med, I realized that I would probably see 50 to 70 patients a day, perhaps have 15 minutes with them, perhaps prescribe them insulin shots and tell them good luck with their type 2 diabetes. And I didn't feel okay about that. And so I realized that with the consumer shifting from the standpoint of I am my own best medicine, there is a higher emphasis on out of pocket expenses. And essentially now insurance companies are investing more in the gym memberships. They actually have write offs for insurance companies for gym memberships, for holistic health initiatives, taxing for poor nutrition consumption in some countries, which is wonderful. Getting rid of alcohol or taxing for alcohol and things of that nature. I personally haven't drank my whole life. I've eaten clean my whole life. I started studying nutrition in sixth grade. So my interest and passion started so young. It stuck with me everywhere I went and then well into my Stanford years. And so to answer that question, I actually started my own side business before I even transitioned from playing professional sports. So I became certified as a personal trainer. I built out my client list and then Skype came about and I built up clients in Los Angeles, Phoenix. I was playing in France and then in Miami. And my clients wanted to work with me everywhere I moved. And I said, I need a solution for virtual training. So
Hmm.
I shared this story because Skype was fresh off, software. People were utilizing it for social aspects, not for, virtual training. And so I called my lawyer and I said, I need something in place from a liability standpoint to allow me to expand on my demographics and have pre-recorded content to be able to scale better.
Hmm.
So from there, I took my passion, my expertise, and my skill sets, and I was able to scale out who I was able to reach and the speed in which I was able to reach them and still be doing other things. So the broader analysis there is I took my passion, turned it into a skill because I have a plethora of CEUs and background, biomechanical analysis, pre and postnatal fitness and health, working with at-risk populations, type 2 diabetics, obese patients. Even though I love working with student athletes and NBA players and NFL players and MLB players, which I've all worked with them, I actually love working with all types of backgrounds.
Okay.
And so I took that background, I took the software, I took my expertise, And I realized that human capital only takes you so far. So I'm going to encourage people there in the business space to think about time, space, compensation, and scalability. And how can you take what you offer in a product or a service, because it's going to fall in one of those two categories, and be able to scale it as fast as possible, reaching demographics that relate to you the most. Being 6'5", because I'll answer that question, it comes about a lot. I am 6'5", and I'm a yoga instructor, and that's a little bit rare. And being a female, and who relates the best to me? I will say 6th to 9th grade volleyball and basketball players, both boys and girls, is a primary demographic that I do work with. Also, pregnant mothers. And so, how am I able to scale and reach them in a way that is relatable, helpful, and goes across all continents, essentially? So that was my journey. As I started very young, I started coaching, I started training, and I was a freshman in Stanford, and I even started doing that on the side. So I
Wow.
started building that, and then by the time I moved back to Los Angeles, I had 30 to 40 clients, and I was doing my own thing. Finished my master's at USC in health communication management, which was a combination of business school and communications. And I've just been in that space forever, since 2001. What's interesting, you look at Peloton, you look at Fitbit, you look at all these companies who, again, product or service, and they've merged the two.
Mhm.
Peloton has a product, which is a bike, and they also have services, which is virtual trainers through their bike and their fitness offerings. So it's just fun to keep a pulse on that industry, because I think more and more people are investing in their wellness, and everybody wants convenience. So whether they work out at home half the time and they work out at a gym another half the time, it's a growing tendency for everybody to integrate that into their life. And so the demand for what you offer is another point I'm going to make. I think in life you have to realize pivoting. And let's say people stop eating donuts. That would be wonderful, right?
Yeah.
Or
Very easy
Starbucks.
first. Yeah. First level to start.
Let's take caffeine. So let's say Starbucks, and all of a sudden there was a mandate that no one can consume caffeine. It's now, an intensely identified drug, or whatever, however they want to classify it. All of Starbucks would suffer, obviously, because that's their marquee product. But I think we're in a space with fitness, health, and wellness where it's just exponentially growing, and people are becoming more and more aware of the prevalence and the importance of investing in your own health. So I just see a great, bright future for that space, and
Mhm.
it continues to grow and pivot in most interesting ways. So for me, that's my personal calling. I love helping people, fitness, health, and wellness. I have my own website, fitforlivinglife.com, and my contact is off of that website as well.
I love that. And I think that's very rare. I feel like what you've done is very rare, where a lot of times someone might, let's say in 6th grade, or whether it's in 3rd grade, they're like, I want to be a veterinarian. That was myself. I'm not a veterinarian now, where for you, if it was like, oh, diet and health, that's very important to me in 6th grade, you continued that and then actually made it happen. So I think that's very rare for you to be able to take what your initial passion was, or original passion, be able to keep, you might have pivoted, but you stayed with that same focus, one before your professional sports career and then after. So I think
Yep.
that's very rare and that's very commendable.
I appreciate that. I think initial interest stems from curiosity. You look at a
Mhm.
young child, they say, I want to be an astronaut. I want to fly to the moon, and it's this far reaching goal, which is somewhat attainable for some people, but a very, very small percentage of people will go after certain goals in life. We all look at professional athletes. A very small percentage of D1 athletes will actually make it at the professional level. So,
Mhm.
how do they re identify that realistic goal, that realistic passion in a way they can execute that path? So for me, I'm going to reemphasize this. If your lifestyle actually emulates the very goal you're going after, you're more likely to achieve it. And so, specifically in the fitness and health space, because I've managed hundreds of personal trainers over the course of my career, I look at the ones that truly love what they do and they also live that which they're promoting.
Mhm.
They actually have a much longer career, because it's who they are. It's their
Yeah.
identity, it's their sense of purpose, it's what they would want for a best friend or a family member. And so it's so ingrained into their DNA and their way of being that their work becomes their play. And they also give an example each and every day about what they're asking for from their clients. So that's, some tidbits in the fitness and health space for sure.
No, and I guess what about for someone who, let's say in 6th grade, maybe they didn't think about what they wanted to do, and let's say they're in their professional sports career now. Like, I guess, do you have any strategies or things that might help someone to focus or sort of find like, what is my passion? What am I passionate about? Or what's something that is not just, oh, this would be great to make money, but it's like, no, this is actually what I'm passionate about, and I can make money doing it, but it's something that's like totally aligned with your own values that you were able to find.
Yeah, that's a great question. I highly encourage young student athletes to do internships, even if they're still in high school and taking the summer months. And granted, I will share my story as I was tied up in the summers. I didn't have any extra free time, but I did start internships slash exposure freshman year in college.
Hmm.
Honestly, I was playing USA basketball, traveling to Vienna, Frankfurt, Brazil, Slovakia, Chetumal, Mexico as a sophomore, junior in high school. So I really didn't have a lot of free time.
Yeah.
But so I have sympathy for finding the time, but making the time for things that are most important to you. So internships are a great way to do that. And don't be afraid to dabble. So it might be computer science, it might be engineering, it might be advertising, it might be marketing, it might be sales. And as soon as you get a little taste of what you actually gravitate towards and what you're really good at doing, you have to be a people person. In certain industries, you have to communicate well and work well with people. If you're in computer science and all you do is coding, you don't necessarily have to have those great communication skills with humans, but with computers. So I always encourage people, just find out what your personality is, what skill sets that you really love, and then go with that and build off of it. But try as many things as you can as young as possible so that as you get to those older stages, you've weeded all of that out.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I guess we didn't go into too much. What was your background? I know when you talked about going to Stanford, like what was your professional career before you started doing what you're doing now that we've been talking about?
Yeah, great question. So essentially, when I went to Stanford, again, I was pre-med and then I
Hmm.
was just shy of a double major. And at that point, from 2001 on, I had already had a side business built up with personal training and yoga and nutrition and all of that. So
Hmm.
I knew I wanted to keep that going. So frankly, prior to that, I was a young entrepreneur. I kind of share these funny stories, but I rode horses for 7 years. And
Okay.
I started my own shop at the horse shows. So I made like tie-dye t-shirts and bracelets and I was just a little entrepreneur at age
Hmm.
8. So I've always had that sense of, how can I make the most of my time? I'm going to be here for 6 hours and I'm only showing 3. What can I do for the other 3 hours? And I just had that unique mindset of kind of leveraging who you're in front of, what do they want to see more of, and how can I offer something of value to this audience and make a business out of it. So I always encourage people to start as young as possible. And for me, it was pretty young where I started to develop that mindset.
No, I love that. And well, I guess when you're talking about when you're saying, okay, I had these 30, 40 clients that they traveled with me, you went through Skype trying to find different resources. For someone that, let's say, is going into and making that transition, so they're going from the professional sports space and now they're going into the business space, what are some of those, I guess, strategies that you use and sort of goal setting techniques that you're able to do to sort of outmaneuver, outwork, and sort of strategize of, all right, I know I could do 100 things. We could all do 1,000 things, but here's the top 5 things or 10 things that are actually going to move the needle. How were you able to sort of set those goals or identify them so that you knew what to execute on?
Yeah, great question. I'm going to go back to the point I made previously, which is optimizing human capital.
Hmm.
So, a product is one thing, it can sell through manufacturing and housing and so forth. A service requires human capital. So, if
Hmm.
I'm going to give, let's just take a very obvious example, a 1 hour massage. Now, massage was highly affected by COVID because that's an in person experience. It's hard to give a virtual haircut, it's hard to give a virtual massage, right?
Hmm.
Those
Yeah.
are services that cannot be replicated in unique ways. However, personal training can be replicated through virtual experiences. So if one can figure out, do I have identify, is this a product or is this a service? And is there a way that I can do other things while this is selling? And
Hmm.
in a way that I can scale it as fast as possible, but still maintain high quality. And I think some people scale too quickly and they try to distribute too quickly and the quality suffers. So I think that's the only downfall of that mindset. But I think the biggest thing is thinking about how much time do I have? How do I allocate my time, my mental and my physical energy? And what are the best ways to scale it as fast as possible while
And
maintaining high quality? Yep.
I guess when you're building that out, trying to maintain the quality, what are you doing? Because I think it's sometimes if for entrepreneurs or innovators, let's say they build something in the basement, they're like, oh, this is amazing. But then like they're like, when they put it out in the world, they're like, ah, it was cool to you, but maybe it's not great for the market.
Yep.
What do you do to sort of make sure that it's a right like product market fit or that it's great for the customer or that it's a good product, but that the customer experience is really what you wanted it to be? Like what do you do to sort of make those things happen?
That's a great question. Number one is feedback,
Mhm.
constructive criticism, and this is something I'll tell a third grader, is when your coach corrects you on the basketball court, they love you, they care about you, they actually think you have high potential. So if a young child can learn to take constructive criticism and feedback and use it to their advantage, which is to improve, and that goes to business. If I'm
Mhm.
gonna take feedback from my customers and improve the product, I'm gonna win. But if I'm, a little bit shut down and I think, no, 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 the way that I'm doing it is the best way, and I'm not open to any feedback, you're actually limiting your growth and your ability to scale. So the number one thing is ask for customer feedback. Number
Mhm.
two is start on a smaller audience. Maybe it's your following. You have a group of 30 yoga enthusiasts and you say, okay, let's try this and tell me what you think. Start with a group you know well, get their feedback, and then scale it after you get that feedback. So it's all about timing, exposure, and then being completely flexible when it comes to adapting to that feedback and adjusting to what you're putting out in the market. And also being okay with saying that didn't work, some marketing tactics. So maybe you run an advertisement with a coupon or a percent off, or you target a particular demographic geographically that you thought would be extremely excited and they're not. Maybe it's the geography. It's not necessarily the people, but it could be the exact zip code, or it could be the age group that you're targeting, or the basketball players that's, fit a certain age group that's going to be more relevant towards. So I think being a little bit aware of tweaking the little details to get the
Mhm.
result you're looking for.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And a lot of times, like what a message might work great for me might not resonate with you, right? So
Absolutely.
you just want to make
Absolutely.
sure that you are pivoting, testing the waters, A/B testing, and that's
Yep.
great that that's something that you put into practice.
Absolutely. And in fitness, for example, it could be lowering risk of injury, improving mental performance for one person. For a pregnant mother, she cares about having a healthy child. For a defensive lineman, they're trying to get bigger, stronger, faster. All they care about is size and speed. It's like you have to have a different conversation in an honest way based on who you're speaking to. And can you actually deliver on what you're promising them? That's huge.
Mhm.
Integrity in your product and service is huge.
Oh, yeah, I love that. And I guess another part that I want to touch on is you talked about going to your attorney, let's say, when you're trying to see, all right, how do I actually expand my reach? How do I get there? Did you have any recommended, I guess, sort of like who did you have in your corner? Whether, when you're in sports, you might have a coach or you might have a personal trainer. In the
Yep.
business side of things, I know you might have that attorney, but did you also have business advisors or what did you set up to sort of like help facilitate your own success that way?
Yeah, great question. I think first and foremost, I go with people I trust, and I say that for everybody. A lot of sports agents have built-in resources. So they'll have a real estate agent, they'll have, a business manager, they'll have investors and people they've already used for the last 15 years. For myself, I turned to my Stanford friends, to be honest with you, because I went
Okay.
to school with them,
Uh-huh.
and I saw what they went through and I trust them. So thankfully, I have a really good network of very close friends, but are very good at their profession, and I tap into those resources typically. I also look at area of expertise. So if you look at intellectual property or you look at e-commerce, there are lawyers that specialize in given sectors. And it's very important, if your question is pertinent to a given sector, to really stick with that sector when you speak with professionals.
Hmm. No, that makes sense. And did you, I guess, for your own personal training side of things or on like sports medicine side or nutrition, do you have other people that are in that same field that you sort of go and you're like, all right, little mastermind group of what do you think about this? What are you doing here? I know you're in the space and we don't compete, but we both understand. Like, do you set up groups like that you ping ideas out of, or what do you do that way?
That's a great question, because the analogy I'm going to use is an individual sport versus a team sport. So if you took golf versus a basketball team, is
Hmm.
that golfer willing to collaborate with other golfers to
Hmm.
perfect their game, right? So in the fitness space, I will say this, that if you have individual personalities that are really good at what they do, let's say a yoga instructor, you will find more often that they stay in their lane. They don't ask for a lot of advice. They observe their competition and then they execute and compete.
Hmm.
Just that's
Okay.
the tendency. However, I think it is a mistake not to have mentors. So throughout my life, I have wonderful other personal trainers that are a bit older.
Hmm.
Some celebrity trainers in Los Angeles, for example, that have done wonderful things. Three of which are retired now, and they actually moved to a super small, quiet area where no one bothers them. They've had their positive impact, and they, have done incredible things, and now they're in a more quiet space. So I think it's really important to always look at either who's older or how things are changing from a technology standpoint, from an environmental standpoint, from a consumer standpoint, and who has done something so creative and disruptive they're like, wow, I can do something like that, or I want to do something similar. And I'm always open to mentoring. I have
Mhm.
young kids aged 10 to 30 come to me and say, I want to do something similar. Will you talk to me for a half an hour? And I think that that is the biggest gift in the world if you can mentor and give back to the next generation that way too.
I love that. I mean,
Yeah.
that's something that I'm sure that you looked for and you were appreciative when you were coming up, and now that you're at the space you are now, you can then actually do that for others. So
Yes, absolutely.
I love that. And I guess when we go to these final questions, I guess before we finish, for what you're doing now and for, let's say, the current space that you're working on, are there investments, are there sort of strategies or sort of recommended approaches that you're seeing? I know you talked about tech a bit, but is there something for, let's say, yourself, of either ideas that you are currently investing in, or if you don't want to speak about specifics,
Yep.
areas that you're like, oh, this is definitely an area I think has a lot of interest or opportunity for growth or impact, of whether you want to put in your own sweat equity or investment dollars behind it. What are you currently seeing in the market, and like what kind of recommendations would you give that way?
Yeah, great question. I always start with someone and say, what is your risk tolerance? I think that's really important to identify, and having a diversified portfolio is also very strategic. Obviously, COVID affected a lot of things going back to products and services and e-commerce and international relations. Even with health issues, it can have a huge impact on how we do international e-commerce as well. So, with
Hmm.
those points put aside, I think it's really important for individuals to, number one, study what markets do they know the most about.
Hmm.
So for me, I know a lot about fitness, health, and wellness, technology, and scalability. However, I do tune into Inc. magazine, Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal. These are reads that I do every day. I have the e-reads, I do them every day. And
Okay.
then I attend live events for Bloomberg, for Inc., and I always keep a pulse on everything. Some other great groups are the Players Impact. TPI is a group of former professional athletes, and it's almost like Shark Tank. And
Mm.
so they do virtual pitching on a monthly basis, and they have companies come in and just speak about their companies. No pressure to invest, but it expands your horizon of what are people trying to do to disrupt the marketplace. And it
Hmm.
gets your creative juices flowing. I'm not a huge TV person, but I love Shark Tank. And so that's kind of, it's like a treat for me just to sit down and hear pitches all day long. I could do that for 8 hours a day and be happy. So
Yeah.
I love just being around creative spaces and thinking about what products and services are new to market. And then also looking at other big investment companies like Bryant Stillwell is a good one in Los Angeles. And they do publicize who they're investing in after they've agreed upon those
Mm.
investments. And then just studying those various websites and keeping up with what other people are doing as well.
I love that. Well,
Yeah.
before I finish, do you have any last bits of like information, insights, recommendations, or just words of wisdoms that you'd give to either one, I guess, business people or professional athletes that are currently in the sport or trying to make that transition? Or maybe they're in sixth grade and they're like, all right, this is what I want to do for the future, like you did.
I appreciate that. So, one major concept I'll give: health is wealth, and being proactive versus reactive in our investments in our health and our wealth is so synergistic.
Hmm.
So, for example, if you eat well, I don't drink alcohol. I mentioned that before. No drugs, no alcohol, clean living, get your sleep, workout. That's just as important as investing in your wealth and your portfolio and your financial returns. So when you think about that psychologically, a lot of people are, again, reactive, not proactive in nature. So if you come up with a 10, 15, 20, 25-year plan based on where you are now, sit down with a financial advisor. I think that's a wonderful task to do. Our National Basketball Retired Players Association, we do offer free financial management consulting for the upcoming rookies that are now
Oh,
going to be veterans. Yeah,
that's great.
that's a huge benefit. So I encourage everyone to take advantage of that and to really come up with a plan, and not only come up with it, but stick to it.
Hmm.
And as we all know, about 5 years ago, there are statistics put on the market: 70% of pro athletes go broke. And it's okay to talk about these things because they're very real,
Hmm.
and have a huge amount of passion for helping people make those good decisions and putting your values in the right places. If you value people and places over things, and really taking your time to develop a life that is supportive and conducive to longevity. And that's, again, health and wealth, they're in the same bucket.
Hmm.
If you can come up with a 5, 15, 20, 25, 30-year plan and be consistent in the choices you're making, relative to health and wealth, you're going to be in a really good place. And that conversation starts young. I'm happy to have that conversation with fifth and sixth graders about good choices. And I think the earlier you can start with financial management and health management, it's the best thing you can do for the next generation, for sure.
I love that. I think that's great advice, and that's for
Yeah.
any age. So it's pointless
Yep.
to make a plan of what you're going to do of like, oh, I want to own this in 30 years when you're like, you're not
Yeah.
going to enjoy it unless you spend some of that time on your actual health. So
Yeah, and is it an appreciating asset or is it a depreciating asset? Because I think sometimes the glitter and people get attracted to depreciating assets, and that's not intelligent, right? So
yeah.
life is all about balance that way, for sure.
I love that. And Carolyn, before we go, what was your website one more time, just so we have that? I know you mentioned it earlier, but
Absolutely. You can visit www.fitforlivinglife.com. And my email is c.moose, MOOS, at stanfordalumni.org.
I love that. Well, thanks so much for being on the show today. I definitely appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's wonderful to be here. I look forward to meeting everyone in person and just keep doing what you're doing. You're impacting a lot of people in positive ways.
Well, same to you. So thanks for being a mentor, advisor, and for killing it in the space professionally, athlete, business, and just personal life. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you.